I wasn't supposed to die that night. I was 34 years old, a cardiac surgeon at Massachusetts General Hospital, and I had spent the last 12 years of my life saving people from death. I understood the human heart better than most, its chambers, its rhythms, its predictable failures. I could repair valves, bypass blocked arteries, restart hearts that had given up. I was good at my job. Some said I was the best. But I didn't believe in God. I hadn't always been this way. When I was 7, I sat beside my father in a small Baptist church in Georgia, singing Amazing Grace with a voice full of innocence and hope. My father was a pastor, a gentleman who believed God answered every prayer, healed every wound, worked all things for good. I believed him then. I trusted with the simple faith of a child who knew nothing of suffering. That faith died when I was 16. My father was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The church prayed. They fasted. They laid hands on him and declared healing in Jesus' name. I prayed too, every single night, on my knees, begging God to spare him. My father never doubted. Even as the cancer ravaged his body, even as he withered to 90 pounds, even as the pain became unbearable, he smiled and said, "God is good. His will be done." He died 6 months later, whispering prayers I no longer believed in. I made a decision that day, standing at his graveside. If God existed and allowed a good man, a man who spent his entire life serving him, to suffer and die like that, then I wanted nothing to do with him. I buried my faith in that cemetery alongside my father. For the next 18 years, I built a wall around my heart, brick by brick, argument by argument, medical fact by medical fact. I became a doctor because I believed in science, in what I could see and measure and prove. The heart was just a muscle. Death was just the cessation of electrical activity. There was no soul. No afterlife. No judgment. No Jesus. I married a woman named Rebecca who shared my beliefs. We had 2 daughters, Emma, age 8, and Lily, age 5. We were happy, I thought. Comfortable. We attended no church, said no prayers, taught our children that morality came from empathy, not from some ancient book written by primitive men. When Emma asked me once, "Daddy, is heaven real?" I smiled and said, "Sweetie, when we die, we just stop existing. That's why we have to make the most of the life we have now." I remember the sadness in her eyes. But I told myself I was protecting her from fairy tales. On the night of November 14, 2023, I had just finished a 7-hour surgery, a quadruple bypass on a 59-year-old man who'd ignored every warning sign until his heart gave out. It was 11:32 p.m. when I finally left the hospital. Boston was cold that night, the kind of cold that bites through your coat and settles in your bones. I was exhausted. I should have called an Uber. But I was arrogant. I was always arrogant. I got in my car and started driving home. I don't remember falling asleep at the wheel. One moment I was on Interstate 93, and the next moment there was a sound, a terrible, metallic shriek, and my car was spinning, flipping, crumpling like paper. I felt my seatbelt snap. I felt my head slam against something hard. I tasted blood. And then I felt nothing. But I was still aware. I was floating above the wreckage, looking down at the twisted remains of my BMW, at the shattered glass glittering on the asphalt, at the steam rising from the crushed hood. I saw my body slumped in the driver's seat, my head tilted at an unnatural angle, blood streaming from a gash above my left eye. I should have been terrified. I should have been in pain. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a strange, detached curiosity. Is that me? I thought. Am I dead? I heard sirens in the distance, growing louder. Red and blue lights painted the highway. A fire truck arrived first. I watched firefighters jump out, shouting commands I could hear with perfect clarity despite having no physical ears. Then an ambulance. 2 paramedics, a young man with red hair and a woman with a purple stethoscope hanging around her neck, rushed to my car with equipment I recognized: cardiac monitor, defibrillator, 4-kit. The woman, her name tag Red Chen, pressed 2 fingers against my neck, searching for a pulse. "No pulse," she said. Her voice was calm, professional. Pupils fixed and dilated. Looks like severe head trauma. We need to move fast. They pulled me from the wreckage and laid my body on a stretcher. I floated above them, watching them work with the same detached fascination I'd once felt watching surgeries as a medical student. Paramedic Chin ripped open my shirt. I saw the buttons scatter and placed electrode patches on my chest. The red-haired paramedic, whose badge read Morrison, squeezed an ambu bag over my nose and mouth, forcing air into lungs that weren't breathing. The monitor beside my body showed a flat green line. Flat line. Asystole. No heartbeat. No electrical activity. Clinically dead. Starting compressions, Chen said. She locked her hands together and began pushing down on my sternum, hard and rhythmic. I watched my chest compress with each thrust, watched my lifeless body jolt with mechanical precision. Morrison glanced at his watch. 11:47 p.m. Mark time of cardiac arrest. 11:47. I would remember that number for the rest of my life, or rather, for whatever was happening to me now. They loaded my body into the ambulance. I followed, though followed isn't the right word. I was just suddenly there, floating near the ceiling of the ambulance, watching Chin continue compressions while Morrison inserted in 4-line into my arm and pushed medications I could name: epinephrine, atropine. Medications I'd ordered 1,000 times for dying patients. Medications that weren't working on me. Still no pulse, Chin said. Her forehead was glistening with sweat. How long has it been? 6 minutes. 6 minutes without oxygen. 6 minutes without a heartbeat. I knew what that meant. I'd seen the statistics. Brain damage begins after 4 minutes. By 6 minutes, even if they revived me, I would likely be a vegetable, unable to speak, unable to think, unable to be anything more than a body kept alive by machines. But I wasn't thinking about brain damage. I was thinking about something else, something I'd never believed in, something I'd mocked and dismissed and called superstition for 18 years. I was thinking, what happens next? The ambulance screeched to a halt at the emergency entrance of Massachusetts General, my own hospital. They wheeled my body through doors I'd walked through thousands of times. I floated behind them, invisible, weightless, impossible. We entered Trauma Bay 3. I saw details I shouldn't have been able to see: a coffee stain shaped like South America on the ceiling tile directly above the bed. A yellow biohazard bin in the corner with the lid slightly ajar. A nurse, Maria Rodriguez, I knew her, with a green smudge on her left sleeve that looked like surgical marker ink. Dr. Patel rushed in, the attending emergency physician I'd worked with dozens of times. He took one look at the monitor and barked, "How long?" 8 minutes, Morrison said. Continue CPR. Charge to 200. A nurse placed defibrillator paddles on my chest. I watched from above as my body convulsed when the electricity shot through it. The monitor showed a brief flutter, then flatline again. Charge to 300. Another shock. Another convulsion. Nothing. 360. The third shock lifted my body off the table. I felt nothing. I was above it all, watching this elaborate dance of death with growing certainty. They were not going to save me. I heard Dr. Patel's voice, quieter now, tinged with resignation. "Maria, you should call the family. Let them know." "Wait," someone shouted. "I've got something. Sinus rhythm. Weak, but it's there." The monitor began to beep. Slow. Irregular. But alive. Dr. Patel exhaled. "Let's get him stabilized and up to ICU. Somebody find out who he is." Maria leaned closer to look at my face, and I saw her eyes widen. "Oh my God. That's Dr. Reeves. That's one of our cardiac surgeons." The room went silent for a moment. They all knew me. They'd all worked with me. And now I was the one on the table, the one they were trying to save. But I wasn't coming back to my body. Not yet. Because something else was happening. I felt a pull, gentle at first, then stronger, irresistible. It wasn't physical. It was deeper than that. like something was reaching into the core of whatever I was and drawing me away. Away from the trauma bay. Away from the hospital. Away from the life I'd known. I looked back one last time at my broken body on the table, at the doctors and nurses fighting to save me, at the monitor beeping its fragile, uncertain rhythm. And then I saw it. A tunnel. Not above me or below me, but somehow in front of me, opening in the air itself like a doorway into nothing. It was dark, not the darkness of a room with the lights off, but a darkness that felt alive, heavy, absolute. And yet at the far end, impossibly distant, I saw a pinpoint of light. The pull grew stronger. I wasn't moving toward the tunnel, I was being drawn into it, like water down a drain, like gravity itself had reversed and was pulling me toward something I couldn't name, something I'd never believed in, something that terrified me more than death itself. I tried to resist. I tried to scream. But I had no voice. No body. No control. And I knew, with a certainty that shattered 18 years of atheism, 18 years of rational, scientific denial, that my life on earth was over. But my journey had just begun. The pull was gentle at first, like a current beneath calm water. But within seconds, it became overwhelming, a force so powerful that resistance wasn't just futile, it was impossible. I was no longer floating above my body in Trauma Bay 3. I was being drawn away, and the hospital room was receding like I was being pulled backward through a dark corridor at impossible speed. But before I surrendered completely to whatever was happening, something made me look back one more time. I could still see them. The doctors. The nurses. My colleagues. My body. Dr. Patel was barking orders, his hands moving with practiced precision as he examined my pupils with a penlight. Pupils are responding now, but sluggish. We need a CT scan immediately. I want to rule out intracranial hemorrhage. Nurse Maria was adjusting the foredrip, her fingers trembling slightly. I'd never seen her nervous before. She was always the calm one, the steady presence in every crisis. But now her lips were pressed together in a thin line, and I could see the fear in her eyes. His oxygen saturation is climbing, another nurse said, Jennifer Park, young, barely 2 years out of nursing school. 92% now. 93. Good, Patel replied. But I don't like how long he was down. 12 minutes without adequate perfusion. Even if he survives, the neurological damage could be. Don't say it, Maria interrupted, her voice sharp. He's one of the best surgeons we have. He has 2 little girls. Don't say it. 12 minutes. I'd been clinically dead for 12 minutes. I knew what that meant. I'd sat in countless meetings discussing cases like mine. I'd reviewed brain scans of patients who'd been deprived of oxygen for that long. The damage was usually catastrophic, severe cognitive impairment, loss of motor function, vegetative state. At best, I'd be a shadow of who I was. At worst, I'd be nothing more than a breathing body. But I wasn't thinking about brain damage. I was thinking about something else entirely, something I couldn't articulate but felt with absolute certainty. None of this mattered anymore. Whatever was pulling me away from that room was far more real, far more permanent, than anything happening to the flesh and blood shell on that hospital bed. I tried to call out to them. I'm here. I can see you. I'm not gone. But no sound came. I had no voice. No lungs to push air through. No vocal cords to vibrate. I was consciousness without form, awareness without substance. And then I saw something that would haunt me, or perhaps save me, for the rest of my life. Through the window of Trauma Bay 3, I could see into the waiting area. And there, sitting in a plastic chair beneath harsh fluorescent lights, was my wife. Rebecca. She was leaning forward, her elbows on her knees, her face buried in her hands. Her shoulders were shaking. She was crying, not the quiet, dignified tears of someone trying to hold it together, but the deep, convulsive sobs of someone whose world was collapsing. A police officer stood nearby, his hat in his hands, his face grave. He must have been the one who brought her, who knocked on our door in the middle of the night and said the words that shatter families, "There's been an accident. Our daughters weren't there." Thank God. Someone must have stayed with them, probably Rebecca's mother. Emma and Lily were home, asleep, unaware that their father was dying in a hospital room just a few hundred feet away from where their mother was falling apart. I wanted to go to Rebecca. I wanted to wrap my arms around her and tell her I was okay, that everything would be fine. But I couldn't move toward her. The pull was too strong. And something deeper was wrong. I realized with growing horror that I didn't know if everything would be fine. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what was waiting for me. For the first time in 18 years, I felt something I thought I'd buried forever. Prayer. Not a conscious decision. Not a theological argument. Just a desperate, instinctive cry from somewhere deep inside, God, if you're there, if you're real, please don't let her suffer. Please take care of my girls. Please. I stopped. Because I heard something. A voice. Not audible, not external, but somehow inside me, around me, through me. It wasn't words exactly, but I understood it as clearly as if someone had spoken directly into my mind. You rejected me for 18 years. Why do you call on me now? The words cut through me like a scalpel. Because they were true. I had rejected God. I had mocked people who prayed. I had told my own daughter that heaven wasn't real. I had lived as if God didn't exist, as if I was the master of my own fate, as if death was just the end and nothing more. And now, at the moment of my own death, I was calling out to the very God I'd spent nearly 2 decades denying. I had no answer. No defense. No rational argument. The pull intensified. I looked back one more time at the hospital, at Rebecca crying in the waiting room, at my broken body on the table, at the life I'd built and was now leaving behind. I saw Dr. Patel shaking his head, saw Maria wipe tears from her eyes, saw Jennifer checking the monitor with the grim expression of someone who knows the odds. And then I saw something I shouldn't have been able to see. Something impossible. In the hallway outside Trauma Bay 3, a janitor was mopping the floor. An older man, Hispanic, wearing blue coveralls. He was working around a yellow wet floor sign that had been placed near the nurse's station. And as he mopped, he was singing quietly, under his breath, a song in Spanish I didn't recognize. But I heard it. Every word. Every note. How was I hearing this? I was no longer in the room. I was being pulled away, drawn into the tunnel, moving farther and farther from the physical world. And yet I could hear him singing, could see the way he moved the mop in smooth figure eights, could see the water reflecting the fluorescent lights above. More than that, I could see into the break room down the hall. 2 nurses were sitting at a table, drinking coffee. One of them, a woman I didn't recognize, was saying something to the other. I can't believe it's Dr. Reeves. He saved my uncle's life last year. Triple bypass. My uncle's got 5 more years now because of him. The other nurse nodded. I heard he's an atheist, though. Doesn't believe in God or anything. Doesn't matter. He's still a good man. I heard every word. I saw the styrofoam cup in her hand, the steam rising from the coffee, the clock on the wall showing 12:03 a.m. How was this possible? I'd been taught, had believed, had taught others, that consciousness was generated by the brain. That without a functioning brain, there could be no awareness, no perception, no experience. The brain was dead or dying. The EEG would have shown minimal or no activity. And yet I was more aware, more conscious, more present than I'd ever been in my life. I could see in all directions simultaneously, not just in front of me, but behind, above, below, as if my consciousness had expanded beyond the limitations of physical eyes. I could hear conversations in rooms I'd never entered. I could perceive details I'd never noticed. And I knew with a certainty that transcended logic that everything I'd believed about the nature of consciousness, about death, about reality itself, was wrong. The tunnel was closer now. Or I was closer to it. The distinction didn't seem to matter. The darkness was absolute, but the pinpoint of light at the far end was growing brighter, more defined. And the pull, it wasn't gentle anymore. It was irresistible, like gravity multiplied by 1,000. I felt fear. Real, primal, overwhelming fear. Because I realized something that shattered the last remnants of my atheistic worldview. This wasn't the end. Death wasn't cessation. It wasn't nothingness. It was a transition. A doorway. And I was about to step through it into something I'd never prepared for, never believed in, never thought I'd have to face. I'd spent 18 years living as if there was no judgment, no accountability, no eternity. And now I was about to find out how wrong I'd been. The hospital was gone. Rebecca was gone. My body was gone. There was only the tunnel now, vast and dark and impossibly real. And I was moving through it, not walking, not flying, but being drawn forward by that relentless pull. Time felt strange. I couldn't tell if seconds were passing or hours. The tunnel seemed endless and yet over in an instant. I tried to look back, tried to see the physical world one last time, but there was nothing behind me now. Only darkness. And then I started seeing things. Flashes. Images. Memories. My 7th birthday, sitting in church beside my father, singing with innocent faith. My 16th birthday, standing at his graveside, fists clenched, tears streaming, rage and grief and betrayal burning in my chest. Medical school. Late nights studying anatomy, dissecting cadavers, reducing human beings to systems and organs and tissue. My wedding day. Rebecca in white, smiling at me, saying vows I'd written myself, vows that mentioned love and commitment but never God, never faith, never anything beyond the two of us. Emma's birth. Holding my daughter for the first time, feeling overwhelming love, whispering to her, I'll protect you. I'll give you a good life. But never, I'll pray for you. I'll teach you about Jesus. I'll point you toward heaven. The memories came faster now, flashing through my consciousness like a film on fast forward. But they weren't random. They were specific. Intentional. Someone or something was showing them to me. I saw myself in the hospital cafeteria, 3 years ago, sitting across from a nurse named David who'd just become a Christian. He was excited, trying to share his faith with me. Dr. Reeves, I know you don't believe, but I have to tell you Jesus changed my life. I was in a dark place, and he pulled me out. I've never felt peace like this before. I remembered what I'd said to him. I'd smiled condescendingly and replied, David, I'm happy you found something that works for you. But religion is just brain chemistry. It's dopamine and serotonin making you feel good. There's nothing supernatural about it. I saw the hurt in his eyes. The way his smile faltered. The way he nodded and never brought it up again. I saw myself at Emma's school, 2 years ago, when she came home crying because another girl told her she was going to hell for not believing in Jesus. I'd held Emma and told her, that girl is wrong. There is no hell. There's no heaven. Those are just stories to scare people. You're a good person, and that's all that matters. I saw Emma's face, confused, wanting to believe me, but still afraid. I saw myself last Christmas, when Rebecca's mother tried to take the girls to a Christmas Eve service. I'd refused. I'm not having my daughters indoctrinated with mythology, I'd said. If they want to explore religion when they're older, that's fine. But I won't have it forced on them now. Rebecca's mother had looked at me with sadness and said quietly, You're so smart, Michael. But you don't know everything. I dismissed her. Arrogant. Certain. Blind. The memory stopped. And the light at the end of the tunnel was no longer a pinpoint. It was growing. Expanding. Filling my vision. I was almost there. Almost at the end of the tunnel, the end of the darkness, the end of whatever journey this was. And I heard that voice again, the one I'd heard in the hospital, the one that had asked why I was calling on God after rejecting him for 18 years. This time, it said something different. You are about to see what you did not believe. You are about to face what you denied. And you are about to understand that every choice has consequences. The light exploded around me. The tunnel disappeared. And I was no longer moving. I had arrived. The light didn't fade gradually. It consumed everything in an instant, the darkness, the tunnel, the last threads connecting me to the physical world. For a moment, I couldn't perceive anything at all. Not because there was nothing to see, but because what I was experiencing was so far beyond the capacity of human senses that my consciousness struggled to process it. And then, slowly, I began to understand where I was. I was suspended in a vast space that wasn't quite space. The light surrounded me, but it wasn't coming from any source I could identify. It simply was existing everywhere at once, pressing in on me from all directions. And within that light, I began to see shapes, forms, movements that resolved into something terrifyingly familiar. My life. Not memories in the way I'd experienced them before. This was different. It was as if every moment I'd ever lived was happening simultaneously, spread out before me like a vast tapestry, and I could see all of it at once. Every word I'd spoken. Every thought I'd had. Every choice I'd made. But I wasn't just seeing my perspective anymore. I was seeing everyone else's perspective too. The first moment that crystallized in front of me was from medical school, 15 years ago. I was in my second year, sitting in a study group with 5 other students. We were preparing for our anatomy exam, and the conversation had turned to religion. One of the students, a quiet girl named Sarah Chen, had mentioned that she'd been praying about the exam because she was struggling. I watched myself laugh. Not a kind laugh. A mocking one. Praying? I'd said, my voice dripping with condescension. Sarah, you know prayer has been scientifically tested, right? Multiple double-blind studies. No effect whatsoever. You'd be better off spending that time studying. The other students had laughed too. Uncomfortable laughter, but laughter nonetheless. And Sarah had gone quiet, her face flushing red. I'd forgotten that moment. It had been nothing to me, just a casual comment, a throwaway line. I'd moved on with my day, my week, my life, never thinking about it again. But now I was seeing it from Sarah's perspective. I felt what she felt. The humiliation. The shame. The way my words cut through her like a knife, not just embarrassing her in front of our peers, but making her question something precious to her, her faith, her relationship with God, her worth as a person. She'd gone home that night and cried. She'd wondered if she was stupid for believing. She'd felt small and insignificant and foolish. And I had done that to her with a single sentence I didn't even remember speaking. The scene shifted. I was in the hospital, 5 years ago, standing beside the bed of a dying patient. Mrs. Eleanor Graham, 73 years old, end-stage heart failure. I'd done everything I could medically, but her body was giving up. She had maybe hours left, possibly less. Her daughter was there, holding her hand, tears streaming down her face. And Mrs. Graham looked up at me with weak, watery eyes and asked, "Dr. Reeves, do you believe in heaven? Do you think I'll see my husband again?" Her husband had died 2 years earlier. She'd been lost without him. I watched myself stand there, professional and distant, and say, "Mrs. Graham, I can't answer that. I deal with the physical body. Questions about the afterlife are beyond my area of expertise. I'm sorry." Technically true. Professionally appropriate. Carefully neutral. But I was seeing it from her perspective now. I felt her hope crumble. She hadn't been asking for a theological treatise. She'd been reaching out in her final hours, desperate for comfort, for reassurance, for any small reason to believe that death wasn't the end. And I had given her nothing. Not even kindness. Just cold, clinical detachment. She died 4 hours later, afraid and alone, despite her daughter's presence. Afraid because the one person in the room who understood what was happening to her body, me, her doctor, had refused to offer even a shred of hope about what might come after. I felt her fear. Her loneliness. Her desperate, aching need for someone to tell her it would be okay. And I had failed her. The scenes came faster now, one after another, each one more devastating than the last. I saw myself at a hospital Christmas party, 3 years ago, openly mocking a colleague who'd mentioned he was fasting for Advent. Fasting? You know that's just ancient ritual, right? It doesn't make you more spiritual. It just makes you hungry. I felt his embarrassment. His resolve weaken. His faith feel small and silly. I saw myself refuse to attend my daughter Emma's school play last year because it had religious themes, a nativity story. I'm not sitting through 2 hours of religious propaganda, I'd told Rebecca. You can go if you want. I felt Emma's hurt. The way she'd scanned the audience looking for me, hoping I'd change my mind. The way her face fell when she realized I wasn't there. The way she'd asked her mother afterward, "Doesn't Daddy love me?" Rebecca had lied to protect me. "Of course he does, sweetheart. He just had an emergency at the hospital." But Emma knew. Children always know. I saw myself at my father's funeral, 18 years ago, standing at the graveside while the pastor spoke about resurrection and eternal life. I kept my head down, my jaw clenched, rage burning in my chest. And when my mother approached me afterward, her eyes red from crying, and said, "Your father is with Jesus now. He's at peace," I'd looked at her with cold contempt and said, "No, Mom. He's not with Jesus. He's in a box in the ground. And all those prayers didn't do a damn thing to save him." I felt my mother's heart break. Not just from grief over losing her husband, but from the realization that she'd lost her son too. Lost him to bitterness. To anger. To a hardness that frightened her. She'd prayed for me every single day after that. For 18 years. Every morning and every night, she'd gotten on her knees and begged God to soften my heart, to bring me back to faith, to help me see the truth. I'd mocked her prayers. Called them a waste of time. And now I was seeing them from God's perspective, not as wasted words disappearing into an empty void, but as precious, powerful, persistent love that reached into the heavens and moved the heart of the Creator. My mother's prayers had followed me for 18 years. And now, in this moment, suspended in this light, being shown the truth of my life, I understood something that shattered me. Those prayers were the only reason I wasn't already in hell. The realization hit me with physical force, though I had no physical body to feel it. If God had given me what I deserved, what I'd chosen, I would have been lost forever. I had rejected him. Mocked him. Lived as if he didn't exist. Taught others, including my own children, to do the same. But my mother's prayers had created a thin thread of grace, a small window of mercy, a final chance to see the truth before it was too late. The light intensified. And I began to see something else, not my past anymore, but something happening in the present. I saw my mother. She was at home, 2 hours away from Boston, asleep in her bed. But something woke her. She sat up suddenly, her heart pounding, and she knew, the way mothers sometimes know, that something was wrong with me. She threw off her blankets, dropped to her knees beside her bed, and began to pray. "Jesus, please," she whispered, her voice desperate. "Please don't let him die without knowing you. Please, Lord. I've prayed for 18 years. I'm begging you, give him one more chance. Let him see you. Let him know your love. Please." Tears streamed down her face. She didn't know I'd been in an accident. Didn't know I was clinically dead. Didn't know that at that exact moment, I was suspended somewhere between life and death, being shown the truth of my existence. But God knew. And He'd woken her to pray. The scene shifted again. I saw something that made no sense at first, a moment from my childhood I'd completely forgotten. I was 9 years old, sitting in Sunday school, and the teacher was telling us about Jesus. She'd shown us a picture, one of those typical paintings of Christ with light skin and flowing hair, and she'd said, "Jesus loves you more than you can imagine. He died for you. He wants a relationship with you." And I'd felt something. A warmth. A pull. A quiet, gentle voice in my heart saying, "I'm real. I'm here. I love you." I'd felt it. For just a moment, I'd felt the presence of God as clearly as I'd ever felt anything in my life. And then the moment passed. And I forgot. Life moved on. Years went by. My father died. My faith died with him. And that moment, that brief, beautiful moment when God had reached out to me as a child, disappeared from my memory. But God hadn't forgotten. He'd been pursuing me my entire life. Through my father's love. Through my mother's prayers. Through colleagues who tried to share their faith. Through patients who asked questions I refused to answer. Through my daughter's innocent questions about heaven. He'd been there, calling to me, every single day. And I turned away. Every single time. The light grew brighter still, and I felt something building, a presence, a power, something vast and terrible and wholly approaching. The weight of it was crushing. Not physically, but spiritually. I felt the full magnitude of my sin, my rebellion, my arrogance pressing down on me. I'd lived as if I was the master of my own life. As if I was the judge of truth. As if I could decide what was real and what wasn't based on my limited human understanding. But I'd been wrong. About everything. And now I was about to face the one I'd spent 18 years denying. A voice spoke, the same voice I'd heard before, but clearer now, louder, more authoritative. It shook everything around me, shook the very core of whatever I was. Michael Andrew Reeves. You have been weighed. You have been measured. You have been found wanting. Terror flooded through me. Pure, absolute, existential terror. Because I knew those words. They were from the Bible, the book I'd dismissed as mythology, as ancient superstition. The book of Daniel. The writing on the wall. The judgment of Belshazzar. And now they were being spoken over me. You rejected me, the voice continued. You led others away from me. You called my truth a lie and my love a delusion. You lived for yourself, trusted in your own understanding, and taught your children that I did not exist. What defense do you offer? I had none. No arguments. No rationalizations. No clever scientific explanations. I'd been wrong. Catastrophically, eternally wrong. And the price of being wrong about God wasn't just embarrassment or intellectual error. It was hell. The light began to change. The warmth that had surrounded me started to fade. And I felt something else taking its place, something cold, something dark, something that filled me with a dread so deep I couldn't comprehend it. I was moving again. Not up toward the light, but down. Away from it. I tried to scream, but I had no voice. I tried to resist, but I had no strength. I was falling not through physical space, but through something else, something worse. And as I fell, I heard voices. Hundreds of them. Thousands. All around me, screaming, wailing, crying out in agony and regret. And I understood with horrible clarity where I was going. I was going to hell. The place I'd told Emma didn't exist. The place I'd mocked believers for warning people about. The place I'd called a fairy tale designed to scare people into obedience. It was real. And I was about to experience it firsthand. The last traces of light disappeared above me. And I descended into absolute darkness. The darkness wasn't empty. I'd imagined darkness as the absence of something, the absence of light, of sensation, of presence. But this darkness was a presence itself. It was thick, suffocating, alive with malevolence. It pressed against me from all sides, not just blocking out light but actively consuming it, devouring any hope that light could ever exist again. And the cold. I'd experienced cold before: Boston winters, the icy wind off the Atlantic, the sterile chill of operating rooms. But this was different. This cold didn't just touch my skin, it penetrated to the core of whatever I was. It was the cold of absolute separation, of being cut off from every source of warmth, love, comfort, or hope. It was the cold of being utterly, eternally alone. But I wasn't alone. I could hear them. The voices. Millions of them, maybe billions, all crying out in the darkness. Some were screaming in agony. Others were weeping uncontrollably. Still others were wailing in a language I didn't recognize but somehow understood, the language of absolute regret, of irreversible loss, of knowing with perfect clarity that you'd made the wrong choice and could never, ever undo it. And beneath all those voices, I heard something worse. Laughter. Not the joyful laughter of friends sharing a moment. Not even the cruel laughter of bullies mocking a victim. This was laughter devoid of anything human, hollow, mocking, triumphant. The laughter of beings who had successfully deceived billions of souls into damnation and were reveling in their victory. I tried to move, to orient myself, to understand where I was. But there was no up or down, no left or right. Just darkness pressing in from every direction and the terrible awareness that I was falling, still falling deeper and deeper into something I couldn't escape. And then I hit bottom. Not physically. I had no body to feel impact. But something changed. The falling stopped. And I became aware of my surroundings in a way that made me wish I'd remained in the darkness. I was standing, or existing, in a vast space that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. The ground beneath me wasn't solid, it shifted and writhed like it was made of living things. The air, if it could be called air, was thick with smoke that smelled of sulfur and burning flesh and something else, something I couldn't identify but that filled me with primal revulsion. And I could see now. Not because there was light, but because the darkness itself was illuminated by flames. Flames that rose from cracks in the ground. Flames that danced in the distance. Flames that burned without consuming, producing heat without light, creating agony without end. This was hell. The word I'd dismissed as metaphor. The concept I'd explained away as psychological projection. The place I'd assured my daughter didn't exist. And it was more real than anything I'd ever experienced on Earth. I saw others now. Thousands of them. Millions. Human forms, recognizable as people but twisted by anguish and despair. They weren't standing together, they were isolated, each one trapped in their own sphere of torment, aware of the others but unable to reach them, unable to find comfort or companionship or any relief from their suffering. And the worst part, the absolutely worst part, was that I could feel their emotions. Not just see them, but experience them. I felt their regret crashing over me in waves. I felt their despair wrapping around my consciousness like chains. I felt their hatred, not hatred of God, though that was there too, but hatred of themselves, of the choices they'd made, of the truth they'd rejected. A man stood, or existed, near me, though near was a relative term in this place where distance seemed to mean nothing and everything simultaneously. He was middle-aged, wearing what looked like the remnants of expensive clothes. His face was contorted in anguish, and he was crying out the same words over and over. I knew. I knew and I didn't care. I knew and I chose this. Oh God, I knew. I understood what he meant. He'd known the truth, known that God was real, that Jesus was Lord, that eternity was at stake, and he'd chosen to live for himself anyway. He'd chosen pleasure over righteousness, wealth over faith, the approval of man over the approval of God. And now he was here, fully aware that he'd made the wrong choice, fully aware that he could have chosen differently, fully aware that it was too late to change. The weight of too late pressed down on me with crushing force. I'd thought hell was about physical torture, flames and pitchforks and demons with horns. And there were flames, yes, burning all around me, producing a heat that seared without consuming. But the real torture was psychological and spiritual. It was the knowledge of what I'd lost. The awareness of what I'd rejected. The understanding that I'd been given everything I needed to make the right choice, evidence, opportunities, people praying for me, God himself calling to me, and I'd said no. I'd said no to God. And he'd honored my choice. That's what hell was. Not God's punishment, but God's absence. Not God sending people away, but people choosing to go away in God, in his terrible mercy, allowing them to have what they'd chosen. I'd chosen to live without God. And now I was experiencing what that truly meant. Forever. The word forever took on a meaning I'd never comprehended before. On earth, I'd understood it intellectually, endless time, no conclusion, continuation without end. But here, I felt it. Every moment stretched into eternity. Every second contained infinite suffering. There was no hope of escape, no possibility of relief, no chance of reprieve. This was my reality now. This was what I'd earned. This was justice. I wanted to scream, but my voice was swallowed by the millions of other voices screaming around me. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to run. I wanted to wake up, to discover this was all a nightmare, to find myself back in my body in the hospital. But I knew with absolute certainty that this was more real than any dream, more permanent than any nightmare. And then I saw something that broke me completely. To my right, though direction seemed meaningless here, I saw a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 25. She was beautiful, or had been once, before the anguish of this place had twisted her features. And she was crying out words that pierced through me. I didn't know. Nobody told me. I didn't know it was this real. Why didn't someone tell me? But that was a lie. I could see her life somehow, flashing before me the way mine had flashed in the tunnel. I saw churches she'd passed. I saw street preachers she'd mocked. I saw friends who'd tried to share their faith. I saw a grandmother who'd prayed for her until the day she died. She'd been told. She'd been warned. She'd been loved. She'd just chosen not to listen. Like me. And then I heard it. A voice that was different from all the others. Deeper. More powerful. Filled with malice and mockery and twisted satisfaction. Welcome, Doctor. I turned, or tried to turn, and saw something that made every fiber of my being recoil in horror. A figure stood before me. Tall. Humanoid but not human. Beautiful and terrible at the same time. His face held echoes of what must have once been magnificent, the face of an angel, a being created to worship in the presence of God. But it was corrupted now, twisted by pride and hatred and millennia of rebellion. I knew who he was without being told. Satan. Lucifer. The deceiver. The enemy of God and of every human soul. You served me well on earth, he said, his voice smooth and mocking. You preached my gospel without even knowing it. You told people I didn't exist. You convinced them there was no judgment, no hell, no consequences. You led your own children away from God. You couldn't have served me better if you'd worshipped me openly. Horror washed over me. Because he was right. I'd thought I was being rational, scientific, intellectual. I'd thought I was freeing people from superstition and fear. But I'd been doing exactly what the enemy wanted, blinding people to the truth, closing their hearts to God, leading them down the broad path to destruction. I'd been Satan's servant. And I'd never even realized it. The irony, he continued, his smile widening, is that you thought you were too smart to be deceived. You mocked the simple believers, called them weak and foolish. But they're in paradise now, and you're here. With me. Forever. The word forever echoed through the darkness, repeated by 1,000 mocking voices. Forever. 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 I felt something break inside me, some last remnant of pride, of self-justification, of the arrogance that had defined my adult life. I'd been so sure of myself. So confident in my intellect. So convinced that believers were the deluded ones. And I'd been catastrophically wrong. I fell, though I was already on the ground, and I cried out with a voice I didn't know I had. I was wrong. I was wrong. Oh God, I was wrong. Satan's laughter filled the air. Now you call on God? Now, when it's too late? Where was your faith when it mattered? Where was your surrender when he was calling you? And I knew with the certainty of someone who'd seen my entire life played before me that he was right. I'd had countless opportunities. My father's love. My mother's prayers. Colleagues' testimonies. Patients' desperate questions. Emma's innocent inquiry about heaven. God had pursued me relentlessly for 34 years. And I'd said no. Every time. This was justice. This was what I deserved. This was Jesus. The name exploded from my lips, not as a curse, the way I'd used it on earth, but as a desperate, broken, final cry. Not because I thought it would help. Not because I believed I deserved mercy. But because I had nothing else left. No arguments. No pride. No hope. Just his name. Jesus. Jesus, please." Satan's laughter stopped. The mocking voices went silent. And something changed. The darkness began to recede, not quickly, but noticeably, like dawn breaking after the longest night. And I felt something I hadn't felt since I'd arrived in this place. Warmth. Not the burning heat of the flames, but genuine warmth. The warmth of presence. Of love. Of hope. A light appeared in the distance, small at first, just a pinpoint, like a star in the vast darkness. But it grew, expanded, pushed back the shadows with authority that couldn't be resisted. Satan screamed, a sound of pure rage and frustration. "No! He's mine! He rejected God! He chose this!" But the light kept coming. And within the light, I saw a figure. A man. Walking toward me through hell itself, unburned by the flames, untouched by the darkness, radiating a love so powerful it shattered the chains of despair that had bound me. He had Middle Eastern features, not the European paintings I'd seen in churches, but the face of a first-century Jewish man. Dark hair. Dark eyes. Skin weathered by sun and suffering. He wore simple robes, white and radiant. And on his hands, I saw scars. Nail scars. This was Jesus. The one I'd denied. The one I'd mocked. The one I'd told my daughter didn't exist. He was real. He was here. And he was coming for me. He walked through hell like a king walking through his conquered territory, not with arrogance, but with absolute authority. The flames parted before him. The demons fled from his presence. Even the darkness itself seemed to recoil, unable to withstand the light that radiated from his very being. And his eyes. I'd examined thousands of human eyes in my career, dilated pupils to check for brain damage, looked for signs of neurological dysfunction, studied the intricate anatomy of the retina. But his eyes were nothing like anything I'd ever seen. They weren't just brown, they held depth. They held eternity. They held galaxies and stars and the weight of all creation. When he looked at me, I felt like he was seeing every version of me simultaneously, the innocent child singing hymns beside my father, the bitter teenager at the graveside, the arrogant doctor mocking believers, and something else, something I'd never become but could have been. He saw who I was. Who I'd been. And who he'd created me to be. The terror I'd felt in Satan's presence transformed into something different in Jesus' presence, not comfort exactly, but awe. Holy, overwhelming, crushing awe. I was in the presence of the creator of the universe, the author of life, the judge of all humanity. The one who'd spoken worlds into existence, who held planets in his palm, who knew every star by name. And he'd come into hell for me. He stopped a few feet away, though distance still felt strange here, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't fully comprehend. There was sorrow in his face. Deep, profound sorrow. But also something else. Love. Not the conditional love I'd experienced on earth, love based on performance, on usefulness, on what I could offer. This was different. This love existed despite what I'd done, despite who I'd been, despite the fact that I was standing in hell itself as a condemned soul who'd rejected him for 18 years. And it broke me. I'd prided myself on being rational, on controlling my emotions, on maintaining professional detachment. But before Jesus, all of that shattered. I collapsed, though I had no physical body to collapse, and the only sound that came from me was a broken, anguished sob. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything." He knelt. The King of the universe, the Lord of lords, the one before whom every knee would bow and every tongue confess, he knelt beside me in hell. Not standing over me in judgment, not pointing his finger in condemnation, but lowering himself to my level, meeting me in my brokenness. And he spoke. His voice was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It wasn't loud, but it filled everything, filled the space around us, filled my consciousness, filled the very core of whatever I was. It was like thunder and whisper simultaneously, like power restrained by infinite gentleness. Michael. That was all. Just my name. But hearing him say it shattered something inside me. Because it was the first time I truly heard my name. Not as a label, not as an identifier on a medical badge, but as something precious, something known, something loved. He said my name the way my father used to say it when I was a child, with tenderness and affection and complete acceptance. I couldn't speak. I could only weep. He reached out and placed his hand on what would have been my shoulder if I'd had physical form. And the moment he touched me, I felt something I hadn't felt since arriving in this place. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of something greater than all my sin, all my regret, all my guilt. His peace didn't erase what I'd done, but it held me in the midst of it, kept me from being consumed by it. You rejected me, he said softly. His words were true, but they weren't accusatory. They were simply fact, spoken with the sadness of a lover who'd been spurned. For 18 years, I called to you. I sent people to you. I gave you opportunities. I spoke to you through your mother's prayers, through your father's love, through the patients who asked you about eternity. And you said no. Fresh waves of shame washed over me. I know. I know. I was blind. I was arrogant. I thought I knew better than you. I thought my voice broke. I thought you didn't exist. And I led others to believe the same thing. I led my own daughters away from you. Saying it out loud made it worse. I'd been entrusted with two precious souls, Emma and Lily, and I'd pointed them away from the very one who'd created them, who loved them, who died for them. Jesus was silent for a moment, and in that silence, I felt the weight of every soul I'd influenced, every person I'd led astray with my confident atheism, every patient I'd denied comfort in their final moments, every colleague whose faith I'd mocked. Do you want to see? He asked quietly. See what? The truth. The full truth of your life. Not just what you remember, but what I saw. The ripple effects of your choices. The consequences of your words. The lives you touched. Terror gripped me. I don't know if I can bear it. You must, he said gently. Because you cannot truly understand grace until you fully understand what you need to be forgiven for. He touched my forehead, or where my forehead would have been, and suddenly I was seeing again. But this time, I wasn't just observing moments from my life. I was experiencing them from his perspective. From the perspective of the people I'd hurt. From the perspective of eternity. The first scene materialized around us, so vivid it was like being transported back in time. I was standing in a hospital room 8 years ago. The patient was a 52-year-old man named Thomas Rivera, dying of liver failure. His wife sat beside him, holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. And Thomas looked up at me with desperate eyes and asked the question I'd been asked 100 times. Doc, do you believe in God? Do you think there's something after this? I watched myself stand there, clipboard in hand, professional mask firmly in place. Mr. Rivera, I'm a scientist. I deal with what I can observe and measure. Questions about the afterlife are outside my field of expertise. Safe. Non-committal. Professionally appropriate. But then Jesus showed me what I hadn't seen. Thomas turned his face to the wall after I left, and I heard his thoughts, even the doctor doesn't believe. Maybe it's all just wishful thinking. Maybe there really is nothing after this. His wife prayed desperately that night, begging God to send someone who could offer Thomas hope. But Thomas died the next morning, and his last thoughts were filled with doubt and fear that I had planted. Did he? I couldn't finish the question. Did he go to hell because of me? Jesus' expression was sorrowful. Thomas called on me in his final moments. He is with me now. But he suffered unnecessary fear in his last hours because you chose silence over truth. You could have offered hope, Michael. You could have pointed him toward me. But you valued your reputation more than his soul. The scene shifted. I was at home now, 3 years ago. Emma was 6 years old, and she'd come home from school crying because a classmate had told her she was going to hell for not believing in Jesus. I watched myself kneel down, take her little hands in mine, and look her straight in the eyes. Emma, sweetheart, listen to me. There is no hell. There's no heaven either. Those are just stories people made up a long time ago because they were afraid of death. You're a good person, and that's all that matters. Being good is enough. I watched Emma's face, the way her tears stopped, the way she trusted me completely, the way she absorbed my words as absolute truth. And then Jesus showed me what happened next. That night, Emma lay in bed thinking about what I'd said. And slowly, over the following months and years, she built her entire worldview on my words. She stopped wondering about God. Stopped asking questions about faith. Stopped being curious about the spiritual realm. I'd closed that door for her. And then Jesus showed me something that made me want to cease existing. He showed me Emma's future, not the future that would happen now, but the future that would have happened if I died that night and stayed dead. I saw her grow up confident in her atheism, just like I'd been. I saw her go to college and major in biology, following in my footsteps. I saw her meet a young man, fall in love, get married. I saw her have children of her own. And I saw her die at age 67 in a car accident, just like I had. And I saw her arrive in the same place I'd arrived. Hell. Because she'd believed what I taught her. Because she'd trusted her father. Because I'd told her with absolute confidence that God didn't exist, and she'd never questioned it. My daughter. My precious Emma. Spending eternity in hell because of me. No. The scream tore from me with a force that shook my entire being. No, please. Not Emma. Not because of me. Please, Jesus, please. But he held up his scarred hand, and the vision froze. That is not her destiny, he said quietly. That is what would have been if you had not called on my name. But you did call. And I am here. And you are going back. The words didn't make sense at first. Going back? Your mother's prayers have created a doorway of mercy. You are not here to stay, Michael. You are here to see. To understand. To carry back a message. But first, you must see the full weight of what you need to be forgiven for. The visions continued, faster now, each one more devastating than the last. I saw the nurse, David, who'd tried to share his faith with me in the hospital cafeteria. After I dismissed him, he'd questioned whether his testimony was worth sharing. He'd become quieter about his faith, less bold. And 6 months later, when another colleague asked him about Christianity, he'd hesitated, and the moment passed. That colleague died 2 years later in a motorcycle accident, never having heard the gospel clearly presented. Not entirely David's fault. Not entirely my fault. But my mockery had contributed to his silence. I saw my mother, praying for me every single day for 18 years. I felt her heartbreak every time I dismissed her faith. I felt her desperate love, her unwavering hope, her refusal to give up even when I gave her every reason to. I saw my wife, Rebecca, who'd been a lukewarm Christian when we met. She'd attended church occasionally, believed in God in a vague, cultural way. But I'd systematically dismantled her faith over our 10 years of marriage. I'd argued, debated, mocked, until she'd eventually agreed with me just to keep the peace. I'd stolen her faith. I saw Sarah Chen from medical school, the student I'd mocked for praying. I saw her struggle with doubt for years afterward, nearly leaving her faith. She eventually recovered, but the wound I'd inflicted had left a scar. Each scene was like a knife to my soul. Each person I'd hurt, each soul I'd endangered, each opportunity I'd wasted. The weight of it was crushing, unbearable. I gasped. I can't take any more. I'm a monster. I deserve hell. I deserve every moment of torment. How can you forgive this? How can anyone forgive this? Jesus was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something I never expected. He showed me his hands. Not just the scars, though those were there, deep and permanent and intentionally kept. But he showed me the moment those scars were made. I saw him on the cross. I saw the nails driven through his wrists, through his feet. I saw the crown of thorns pressed into his skull. I saw the blood running down his face, his arms, his body. I saw the agony in his eyes as he hung there, suspended between heaven and earth, carrying a weight I couldn't comprehend. And then he showed me what that weight was. It was my sin. Every mocking word I'd spoken. Every patient I'd failed. Every soul I'd led astray. Every time I'd closed my heart to him. Every moment of pride and arrogance and rebellion. He'd carried it all on that cross. He'd felt the full weight of my guilt, my shame, my wickedness. And he'd chosen to do it. Not because he had to. Not because he was forced. But because he loved me. Because he looked forward through time and saw me, saw the angry teenager at his father's grave, saw the arrogant doctor mocking believers, saw the condemned soul crying out his name in hell, and he decided I was worth dying for. These scars, he said softly, holding his hands before me, are for you, Michael. I would do it again. 1,000 times. 1,000,000 times. That's how much you matter to me. That's how much I love you. I reached out tentatively, disbelievingly, and touched his hand. The moment my consciousness made contact with his scar, I felt something that changed me forever. I felt the love that endured the cross. Not just abstract love. Not just theological concept. But actual, experiential, overwhelming love that would rather die than lose me. Love that pursued me through 18 years of rejection. Love that woke my mother in the middle of the night to pray. Love that came into hell itself to find me. And I broke. Not the shallow breaking I'd experienced before. Complete, total, utter breaking. Every wall I'd built, every argument I'd constructed, every shred of pride and self-justification, it all shattered in the face of his love. I don't deserve this, I sobbed. I don't deserve you. No one does, he said gently. That's what makes it grace. You can't earn it, Michael. You can't work for it. You can only receive it. The question is, will you? I looked up at him, at his scarred hands, his face radiating love and sorrow and hope, his eyes holding all of eternity. Yes, I whispered. Yes. I believe. I surrender. I'm yours. Whatever you want from me, whatever you ask, I'll do it. I'll spend the rest of my life telling people about you. I'll tell them you're real. I'll tell them hell is real. I'll tell them they need you. I'll tell them. He smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him smile, and it was like watching the sunrise after the longest night. Then it's time for you to go back, he said. Back? To Earth? You have work to do. A message to carry. People to reach. Your daughters need you, not the old you, but the new you. The you that I'm creating right now. He placed both hands on my head, and warmth flooded through me. Not just warmth, but power. The power of transformation. I felt myself changing, being remade from the inside out. When you return, he said, tell them everything you've seen. Tell them I am. Tell them I'm coming back soon. Tell them there's still time, but not much time. Tell them hell is real, but my love is greater. Tell them no one is too far gone, no one is beyond my reach. Tell them to call on my name while there's still breath in their lungs. I will, I promised. I swear to you, I will. He leaned forward and embraced me, the creator of the universe embracing a man who'd denied his existence for 18 years. And in that embrace, I felt forgiveness wash over me like a tidal wave. Not partial forgiveness. Not conditional forgiveness. Complete, total, absolute forgiveness. Every sin, every failure, every soul I'd endangered, washed away by his blood, covered by his grace, erased by his love. One more thing, he said, pulling back and looking into my eyes. When you tell people your story, many won't believe you. Some will mock you like you once mocked others. Some will say you hallucinated, that it was just brain chemistry. Are you willing to endure that? I thought about my reputation, my career, my standing in the medical community. The old me would have said no, would have kept this experience private to protect my image. But I wasn't the old me anymore. I don't care what they say, I said firmly. I've seen you. I've touched your scars. I've been to hell and you rescued me. Let them mock. Let them call me crazy. I know what's real." He smiled again, and this time there was something else in his expression. Pride. Not the sinful pride I'd carried, but the pride of a father watching his child take a brave step forward. "Then go," he said. "Go back and tell them. Tell them all. And remember, I'll be with you. Every moment. Every day. Until the day you come back to me for good." And that day, his smile widened, there will be no more tears. No more pain. No more death. Just you and me and all my people, together forever in paradise. He touched my chest, where my heart would have been if I'd had a body. And everything exploded into light. Blinding, brilliant, beautiful light. I felt myself being pulled again, not down into darkness this time, but up toward life, toward breath, toward the world I'd left behind. The last thing I heard was his voice, echoing through everything. "Go and tell them, Michael. Tell them I'm real. Tell them I'm coming. Tell them there's still time." And then. Pain. Burning, searing, physical pain in my chest. The smell of antiseptic and blood. The sound of machines beeping. The feeling of air being forced into my lungs. I gasped a deep, desperate, life-giving gasp. And I opened my eyes. I was back. The pain hit me first, sharp, overwhelming, undeniable. My chest felt like it was being crushed. My head throbbed with a migraine that made every previous headache I'd experienced feel like a mild annoyance. My entire body screamed in agony, reminding me that I had a body again, that I was physical, that I was alive. I tried to inhale and choked. There was something in my throat, a tube, I realized, an endotracheal tube forcing air into my lungs. My medical training kicked in automatically. I was intubated, on a ventilator, in critical condition. But I was breathing. My heart was beating. I was alive. My eyes flew open. The lights above me were blindingly bright after the darkness of hell. I squinted, disoriented, trying to focus. Faces appeared above me, blurry at first, then sharpening into clarity. Dr. Patel. Nurse Maria. A respiratory therapist whose name I couldn't remember. "He's awake." Maria's voice was high-pitched with shock. "Dr. Patel, he's awake and conscious." Patel leaned over me, shining a penlight into my eyes. I tried to pull away from the brightness, but I couldn't move. Restraints. They'd restrained my wrists to the bed rails, standard procedure for intubated patients who might try to pull out their tubes. "Michael, can you hear me?" Patel's voice was calm but urgent. "Blink twice if you understand me." I blinked. Twice. His face registered pure astonishment. "You've been in a coma for 16 hours. You shouldn't be conscious yet. Your CT scan showed severe brain swelling. We thought," he stopped himself. "Never mind what we thought. You're awake. That's what matters. 16 hours. I'd been unconscious for 16 hours. But I'd experienced what felt like days in that other realm, dying, descending into hell, encountering Jesus, being transformed and sent back. I tried to speak, but the tube in my throat made it impossible. I gagged, my body instinctively fighting against the foreign object. "He's fighting the vent," the respiratory therapist said. "Strong gag reflex. That's actually a good sign." Patel examined my pupils again, checking my neurological responses. "Michael, I'm going to ask you some questions. Blink once for yes, twice for no. Do you know where you are?" "Yes." "One blink. Do you know what happened to you?" "Yes." "One blink." I knew exactly what had happened. I'd died in a car accident. I'd been clinically dead for 12 minutes. I'd left my body, descended into hell, cried out to Jesus, and been rescued. I'd touched the scars in his hands. I'd felt his love. I'd been forgiven and sent back with a mission. But they didn't know any of that. To them, I was just a trauma patient who'd been in a severe car accident and miraculously survived. "Can you squeeze my hand?" Patel held out his right hand. I focused on my fingers. They felt distant, disconnected, like they belonged to someone else. But slowly, painfully, I managed to close my hand around his. "Good grip strength," he said, and I heard the amazement in his voice. "Maria, this is incredible. By all rights, he should have severe neurological deficits. 12 minutes without adequate oxygen, significant brain swelling on the CT, he should be showing signs of hypoxic brain injury. But his responses are normal. Better than normal. It's a miracle," Maria whispered. She had no idea how right she was. Over the next hour, they performed a series of tests, checking my motor function, my sensory responses, my cranial nerves. Everything was intact. Perfect. As if I'd never been injured at all. "I'm going to extubate you," Patel finally said. "Your oxygen levels are excellent, and you're clearly ready. This is going to be uncomfortable, but it'll be over quickly. On the count of 3, I need you to take a deep breath and cough. 1, 2, 3. I coughed, and he pulled the tube out in one swift motion. I gagged, my throat raw and burning, but then, blessed relief. I could breathe on my own. I could speak. "Water," I croaked. My voice sounded like sandpaper scraping against metal. Maria brought a small cup with ice chips. "Just a little at first. Your throat needs time to recover." The ice melted on my tongue, cool and soothing. I swallowed carefully, wincing at the pain in my throat. "How do you feel?" Patel asked, pulling up a chair beside my bed. How did I feel? How could I possibly explain what I felt? I'd been to hell. I'd met Jesus. I'd been transformed from the inside out. My entire worldview had been shattered and rebuilt in the span of what felt like hours but had actually been less than a day. "Different," I finally managed to say. "I feel different." Patel nodded. "That's common after a near-death experience. You've been through significant trauma. Your body and mind need time to process." "No," I interrupted, my voice getting stronger. "Not that kind of different. I died, Dr. Patel. I was dead for 12 minutes. And I went somewhere." His expression shifted, the look doctors give patients when they're concerned about psychological trauma or brain injury affecting cognition. "Michael, it's not uncommon for patients who've experienced cardiac arrest to have vivid dreams or hallucinations. The brain, deprived of oxygen, can create very realistic." "I know what you're going to say," I cut him off again. "I would have said the same thing 16 hours ago. Brain hypoxia. DMT release. Hallucinations. But it wasn't that. I was there. I saw things I couldn't have seen. I heard conversations that happened while I was clinically dead." Maria's eyes widened. "What kind of things?" I closed my eyes, reaching back for the memories that were still crystal clear in my mind. There was a coffee stain on the ceiling tile directly above my bed. Shaped like South America. "And you," I looked at Maria, "you had a green mark on your left sleeve. Looked like surgical marker ink." Her hand went automatically to her sleeve, even though she was wearing a different scrub top now. "How did you?" And in the hallway, there was a janitor mopping the floor around a yellow wet floor sign near the nurse's station. Hispanic man, older, wearing blue coveralls. He was singing in Spanish while he worked. Patel and Maria exchanged glances. "Michael," Patel said carefully, "those are details you could have been aware of before you lost consciousness, or during brief moments of semi-consciousness." "I was floating above my body," I said firmly. "I watched you work on me. I heard you tell Maria to call my family. I heard you say you didn't like how long I'd been down, that the neurological damage would be catastrophic." I paused. "You were wrong." The room went silent. Maria was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "What else did you see?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never noticed before in all our years of working together. She believed. She was a Christian. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she was leaning forward, in the hope mixed with fear on her face. I saw my wife in the waiting room, I said quietly. She was crying. Really crying. There was a police officer with her. And somewhere in this hospital, I closed my eyes again, remembering the vision I'd had while out of body. In the break room, 2 nurses were drinking coffee. One of them said I'd saved her uncle's life last year. Triple bypass. She said her uncle has 5 more years because of me. Maria gasped. That was Jennifer. Jennifer Park. She told me that exact thing last night. I heard her say it, I said. While I was dead. Patel stood up, pacing now, his scientific mind trying to reconcile what I was saying with what he believed about consciousness and brain function. Even if we accept that you had some kind of out-of-body awareness, which I'm not ready to concede, that doesn't mean you actually went somewhere. Near-death experiences have been documented for decades. They can be explained by I went to hell. The words hung in the air like a grenade. I rejected God for 18 years, I continued, my voice gaining strength even as my throat protested. I was an atheist. You know that, Patel. You've heard me mock believers. I told people religion was superstition, that there was no afterlife, that death was just the end. He nodded slowly. Yes. I've heard you say those things. I was wrong. About everything. Tears started streaming down my face, not tears of pain, but tears of wonder and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. I died, and I went to hell. Real hell. Darkness and flames and the screams of billions of lost souls. I felt their regret, their despair, their knowledge that it was too late. And I was one of them. I deserved to be there. Every soul I'd led astray, every patient I'd denied comfort to, every time I'd mocked God, I deserved hell. Maria was crying now too, her hand covering her mouth. But I called on Jesus, I said, my voice breaking. I didn't think it would work. I didn't think I deserved mercy. But I cried out his name, and he came. He walked into hell itself and rescued me. I saw him, Patel. I touched the scars on his hands. I felt his love. And he forgave me. For everything. And he sent me back to tell people the truth. Patel sat down heavily, his face pale. Michael, you need to rest. You've been through tremendous trauma. What you're experiencing is a psychological response to. There's a crack in the ceiling tile, I said suddenly, looking up. Right there. Looks like a lightning bolt. They both looked up. There was indeed a crack in the ceiling tile, exactly as I described. I saw that from above while you were working on me, I said. I was floating near the ceiling, watching everything. Tell me how I saw that if it was just hallucination. No one had an answer. The door to my room burst open, and Rebecca rushed in. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, her hair disheveled, her face drawn with exhaustion and fear. The moment she saw me awake, alert, looking at her, she let out a sob and rushed to my bedside. Michael! Oh my God, Michael, they said you might never wake up, they said it. She grabbed my hand, holding it tight, her tears falling on my arm. I'm okay, I said softly. I'm here. I'm back. I thought I'd lost you, she whispered. The girls Emma keeps asking when Daddy's coming home, and I didn't know what to tell her. I thought. Where are they? I interrupted. Where are Emma and Lily? With my mother. I didn't want them to see you like this. I didn't want them to. Bring them, I said urgently. Please, Rebecca. I need to see them. I need to tell them something important. She looked confused but nodded. Okay. I'll call my mom. They can be here in a few hours. There's something else I need to tell you, I said, squeezing her hand. Something happened while I was gone. Something that changed everything. She looked at me, searching my face, and I saw the exact moment she realized I wasn't the same man who'd driven away from the hospital 16 hours ago. Something in my eyes, in my expression, in my very presence was different. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "I met Jesus," I said simply. "And he's real, Rebecca. All of it is real. Heaven, hell, eternity, it's all real. And we need to talk. About everything. About how we've been living, about what we've been teaching our daughters, about what matters and what doesn't." She stared at me, her mouth slightly open, clearly not knowing how to respond. Dr. Patel cleared his throat. "Rebecca, why don't we give Michael some time to rest? He's been through a lot, and he needs." "No," I said firmly. "I don't need rest. I need to talk. I need to tell people what I saw. How long until I can be discharged?" "Discharged?" Patel looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Michael, you were in a severe car accident. You have multiple fractured ribs, a concussion, internal bruising, and you were clinically dead for 12 minutes. You need at least a week of observation, probably more." "I don't have a week," I said. "Jesus told me to tell people. He told me to warn them. I need to. Michael." Patel's voice was stern now, his doctor voice. "You're not going anywhere. And I'm going to order a psychiatric consult. What you're experiencing, the religious visions, the sense of urgency, the personality change, these can all be symptoms of traumatic brain injury or post-resuscitation syndrome." I looked at him, my colleague, my friend, a man I'd worked beside for years. And I saw what I used to be reflected in his face: skepticism, scientific certainty, the absolute conviction that everything could be explained by natural processes. "Order whatever consults you want," I said calmly. "Test me. Scan my brain. Run every test in the book. You won't find brain damage. You won't find psychological impairment. What you'll find is a man who was dead and is now alive. A man who was lost and is now found. A man who rejected God for 18 years and has now been forgiven." I turned to Maria, who was still crying quietly. "You believe me, don't you?" She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I've been praying for you for years, Dr. Reeves. Every time I heard you mock someone's faith, every time you dismissed God, I prayed. I prayed that someday you'd see the truth." "Your prayers were heard," I said, my own tears flowing freely now. "They all were. My mother's prayers, your prayers, the prayers of everyone who looked at me and saw a lost soul and refused to give up. God answered them." I looked back at Rebecca, who was still holding my hand but looking at me like I was a stranger. "I know this is hard to understand," I told her. "I know you don't believe. I taught you not to believe. But I'm begging you, listen to me. Really listen. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't just about me. It's about you. It's about Emma and Lily. It's about eternity." She swallowed hard and nodded. "Okay. I'm listening." And so I began to tell her everything. About the tunnel. About hell. About Jesus. About his scars and his love and his message. And as I spoke, I felt the same presence I'd felt when he touched me in hell. Jesus was with me. Just like he'd promised. I was back in my body, back in the world, back in the hospital where I'd worked for 12 years as a confident atheist surgeon. But I was no longer that man. I had died. I had been to hell. I had been rescued by Jesus. And I would spend every remaining day of my life telling anyone who would listen. He is real. It is all real. And there's still time to choose. But not much time. They kept me in the hospital for 5 more days. Not because I needed it medically, every test they ran came back perfect, inexplicably perfect, but because Dr. Patel was convinced I'd suffered some kind of psychological break. The psychiatric consultant, Dr. Sarah Morrison, spent 3 hours interviewing me, asking the same questions in different ways, trying to find inconsistencies in my story or signs of delusion. She found none. "Your cognitive function is completely intact," she told me on the 3rd day, reviewing her notes with a puzzled expression. "Your memory is excellent. You're oriented to person, place, and time. You show no signs of psychosis, mania, or dissociative disorder. But the radical personality change, the religious preoccupation, the sense of divine mission, these are concerning. Concerning because they're symptoms of brain injury? I asked. Or concerning because they challenge your worldview? She looked at me sharply. That's not fair, Dr. Reeves. Neither is dismissing my experience as pathology just because it involves God, I'd replied calmly. I'm not delusional, Dr. Morrison. I'm transformed. There's a difference. She'd eventually cleared me for discharge with a recommendation for outpatient therapy, a recommendation I accepted, not because I thought I was mentally ill, but because I knew I'd need support processing everything that had happened. Rebecca brought Emma and Lily to visit on the 4th day. The moment my daughters walked into that hospital room, I broke down completely. Emma, my beautiful, intelligent, too serious for her age Emma, ran to my bedside and threw her arms around my neck, careful of my 4 lines and monitors. Lily, only 5 years old and confused by everything, climbed up onto the bed beside me and curled against my side. Daddy, you're okay. Emma said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. Mommy said you were really hurt. I was so scared. I held them both, breathing in the scent of their hair, feeling the solid reality of their small bodies, overwhelmed by the knowledge of how close I'd come to never seeing them again. Not just never seeing them in this life, but potentially losing them for eternity if I'd stayed dead and they'd followed the path I'd set them on. I'm okay now, sweetheart, I whispered. And Daddy needs to tell you something very important. Both of you. Rebecca stood at the foot of the bed, her arms crossed, her expression guarded. We'd talked several times over the past few days, long conversations where I'd shared my experience in detail. She wasn't hostile, but she wasn't convinced either. She was processing, trying to reconcile the husband she'd known for 10 years with the man I'd become. Emma, do you remember when you asked me about heaven? I began, stroking her hair. When you came home from school crying because another girl said you'd go to hell if you didn't believe in Jesus? Emma nodded against my chest. You said there's no heaven or hell. You said they were just stories. I was wrong, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I was completely, terribly wrong. And I'm so sorry I told you that, sweetheart. Heaven is real. Hell is real. God is real. And Jesus is the most real thing in the entire universe. Emma pulled back to look at me, her eyes wide and confused. But you said. I know what I said. And I was lying. Not on purpose, I really believed it was true. But I was wrong, and now I know better, and I need you to know better too. I cupped her face in my hands, looking directly into her eyes that looked so much like my father's. Jesus is real, Emma. I met him. When I was in the accident, I died. I actually died. And I went to a place called hell, and it was the most terrible place you could ever imagine. But then I called out to Jesus, and he came and rescued me. He saved me. And he sent me back to tell you and Mommy and everyone else that he's real and he loves you and he wants you to know him. Tears were streaming down Emma's face. You really met Jesus? Like, for real? For real, I said firmly. He has scars on his hands from when they nailed him to the cross. I touched them, Emma. I felt them. And he told me to come back and tell you the truth. Lily, who'd been listening with the simple acceptance of a 5-year-old, piped up, Is Jesus nice? I laughed through my tears. He's more than nice, Lily Bear. He's the most loving, most wonderful person who's ever existed. And he loves you so much. So much. Does he want to be my friend? She asked innocently. He wants to be more than your friend, I said, pulling her closer. He wants to be your savior. He wants to be the most important person in your whole life. Rebecca's voice cut through the moment, tight and controlled. Michael, they're just children. Don't you think this is a lot to put on them right now? I looked up at her, and I saw the fear in her eyes. Not fear of God, but fear of change, fear of losing the life we'd built, fear of what it would mean if everything I was saying was true. Rebecca, they need to know, I said gently but firmly. If I died that night, really died, permanently, they would have grown up believing what I taught them. And when their time came, they would have ended up in the same place I ended up. I can't let that happen. I won't. She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We'll talk. All of us. When you come home. And we did talk. For hours and hours over the following weeks. I told them everything, every detail of my experience, every moment of my transformation. Emma asked questions constantly, her analytical mind trying to process it all. Lily simply accepted it with childlike faith. And Rebecca? Rebecca struggled. But she listened. And slowly, I saw her walls beginning to crack. I was discharged on day 5 with strict instructions to rest, avoid stress, and attend follow-up appointments. I ignored most of those instructions. The first thing I did when I got home was get rid of books. My entire library, hundreds of books on atheism, secular humanism, evolution as a replacement for God, scientific materialism, I packed them all into boxes. Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, authors I'd revered, whose arguments I'd memorized and wielded like weapons against believers. I donated most of them and burned the rest. Rebecca thought I was being extreme. But I knew what those books represented, poison that had infected my mind for 18 years. I replaced them with a Bible. Just one book. The book I'd dismissed as mythology for nearly 2 decades. And I started reading it like a man dying of thirst who'd finally found water. The second thing I did was call my mother. She answered on the first ring, her voice trembling. Michael? The hospital said you were discharged. Are you okay? Do you need me to come up there? Mom, I said, and my voice broke on the word. Mom, I need to tell you something. You were right. About everything. God is real. Jesus is real. And I'm so sorry for all those years I fought you, mocked you, hurt you. But your prayers worked, Mom. They worked. There was silence on the other end, and then I heard her sob, deep, gasping sobs of relief and joy, in 18 years of answered prayer finally coming to fruition. Tell me, she whispered. Tell me what happened. I told her everything. And when I finished, she was crying so hard she could barely speak. I knew, she finally managed. God woke me up that night, the night of your accident. I didn't know what was wrong, but I knew I needed to pray. I prayed for hours, Michael. I begged God to give you one more chance. I told him I wouldn't stop praying until you came back to him. You saved my life, Mom, I said, tears pouring down my face. Your prayers literally saved my life. If you hadn't prayed, I'd be in hell right now. Forever. It wasn't me, she said softly. It was Jesus. It's always been Jesus. The third thing I did, and this was the hardest, was tell my colleagues. I went back to work 3 weeks after the accident, against medical advice but with medical clearance. The moment I walked into Massachusetts General Hospital, I felt the weight of what I had to do. These were people I'd worked with for years. People who knew me as the brilliant, rational, atheist surgeon who had zero patience for religious nonsense. I called a meeting with my surgical team. 12 people crowded into the conference room, looking concerned and curious. I wanted to update you all on my recovery, I began, standing at the head of the table. And I wanted to tell you what happened to me. Not just medically, but spiritually. I saw several people shift uncomfortably. I died in that accident, I continued. Clinically dead for 12 minutes. And during that time, I had an experience that changed everything I believe about reality, consciousness, and God. Dr. Anderson, a fellow cardiac surgeon and longtime friend, interrupted. Michael, we've all heard about near-death experiences. It's a fascinating neurological phenomenon, but I went to hell, I said flatly. And then Jesus rescued me. The room went completely silent. For the next 30 minutes, I told them my story. I watched their faces: skepticism, concern, disbelief, discomfort. A few people got up and left partway through. Several others exchanged glances that said clearly, he's lost it. The accident damaged his brain. But a few, including Maria, who was crying openly, listened with open hearts. When I finished, Dr. Anderson spoke carefully. "Michael, I say this as your friend. You need more time off. What you're describing sounds like a textbook case of hypoxic hallucination combined with psychological trauma. There's no shame in that. But you need treatment." "I don't need treatment," I said calmly. "I need to tell the truth. And the truth is that everything I taught you about consciousness being purely material was wrong. Everything I said about death being the end was wrong. Everything I believed about God not existing was wrong. And I'm telling you now, as your colleague and friend, Jesus is real. You will die someday. And when you do, you will stand before him. What will you say?" The meeting ended awkwardly. Several people stopped talking to me after that. Rumors started spreading that I'd suffered brain damage in the accident. Within 2 months, I was quietly asked to take a leave of absence, not fired, but strongly encouraged to focus on my recovery and mental health. I accepted. Because I realized something: God wasn't calling me to continue being a surgeon. He was calling me to something else. I'd spent 12 years saving physical hearts. It was time to start pointing people toward the one who could save their souls. My life now looks nothing like it did a year ago. I sold our house in Boston, the big, beautiful house that had been a symbol of my success, and moved my family to a modest home in Georgia, near my mother. Rebecca was terrified by the decision, but she'd seen too many changes in me to fight it. And slowly, she was changing too. 3 months after my accident, she prayed with me to surrender her life to Jesus. She wept as she prayed, releasing years of doubt and fear and the comfortable agnosticism I'd convinced her to embrace. Emma accepted Jesus a week later. Lily had accepted him the day I told her the story in the hospital, with the simple, beautiful faith of a child who has no reason to doubt. I quit medicine entirely. The job that had defined my identity, that had been my purpose and passion for 15 years, I walked away from it. Because Jesus gave me a new purpose: tell my story. I started speaking. Anywhere that would have me. Churches, youth groups, addiction recovery centers, prisons. I told my story over and over. The atheist surgeon who died, went to hell, met Jesus, and came back transformed. Some people received it with joy. Others mocked me, just as Jesus had warned they would. I've been called delusional, brain-damaged, or religious fanatic. I've lost friends. Former colleagues cross the street when they see me coming. Medical journals that used to publish my research now won't return my calls. I don't care. Because I've seen eternity. I've felt the flames of hell and the love of Jesus. And I know, with a certainty that transcends logic or science or peer approval, that nothing in this world matters except pointing people toward him. In the 18 months since my accident, 47 people have given their lives to Jesus after hearing my story. 47 souls who were headed toward hell but changed course. 47 people who will spend eternity in heaven instead of that terrible darkness. That number makes losing everything else worth it. But there's something else Jesus told me to share. Something that's harder to talk about, something that makes people even more uncomfortable than my hell testimony. He told me he's coming back soon. Not soon in the vague, distant future way we usually mean it. Soon as in within this generation. Soon as in time is running out. I don't know the day or the hour. Jesus was clear that no one knows that. But he showed me things while I was in his presence. I saw glimpses of what's coming: increasing chaos, persecution of believers, a world that grows darker even as it claims to be enlightened. But I also saw something beautiful, a great harvest of souls, people coming to Jesus in massive numbers before the end, one final wave of grace before judgment falls. And that's why I'm telling you this story right now. Because you're part of that harvest. You, watching this video, reading these words, hearing this testimony, this isn't an accident. God brought you here. He's calling you. Right now. In this moment. And you have a choice to make. Maybe you're an atheist like I was. You've got it all figured out. You know that consciousness is just brain chemistry, that near-death experiences are just hallucinations, that religious people are deluded. I understand. I believed exactly what you believe. I used the same arguments you use. I mocked the same people you mock. But I was wrong. And you're wrong. And you're going to find that out eventually, either in this life through transformation, or in the next life through condemnation. I'm begging you, don't wait until you're standing in hell to figure it out. Call on Jesus now, while you still have breath in your lungs. Maybe you're Muslim. You believe Jesus was a great prophet, a good teacher, a holy man. And I respect your faith, truly, I do. But I'm telling you what I saw. Jesus isn't just a prophet. He's the Son of God. He's the Savior. He showed me the scars where they nailed him to the cross, and he said, I died for you. Not Muhammad. Not any other prophet. Jesus. And he's calling you by name. Maybe you're Hindu or Buddhist, searching for enlightenment, believing in reincarnation and karma and many paths to God. I understand the appeal of those beliefs, they seem wise and ancient and sophisticated. But Jesus told me something in hell. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Not one path among many. The path. The only path. And he's inviting you to walk it. Maybe you're a lukewarm Christian. You go to church sometimes. You believe in God in a vague, cultural way. You think being a generally good person is enough. That's what I told my daughter, that being good is enough. But I'm telling you, it's not. Jesus doesn't want your church attendance. He doesn't want your religious performance. He wants your heart. He wants relationship. He wants passion. He wants you to know him, not just know about him. And let me be clear about something, he's coming back. Soon. And when he does, there will be no more chances. No more opportunities. No more, I'll get right with God eventually. The door will close. And everyone who hasn't surrendered to him will face exactly what I faced, eternity in hell. I know that sounds harsh. I know it makes people uncomfortable. When I was an atheist, I would have rolled my eyes at this kind of fire and brimstone preaching. But I've been there. I've felt the flames. I've heard the screams. I've experienced the crushing weight of eternal regret. And I'm telling you, it's real. All of it. Every word of the Bible is true. Every warning about hell is accurate. Every promise about heaven is waiting to be fulfilled. But you have to choose. You have to surrender. You have to call on his name. And you have to do it now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not when you've gotten your life together or figured everything out or become a better person. Now. Because you don't know if you'll have tomorrow. I didn't think November 14th, 2023 would be the day I died. I had plans. Surgeries scheduled. Years of life ahead of me. But none of that mattered when my heart stopped. The same could happen to you. Today. Tonight. An hour from now. And when it does, where will you go? If you died right now, this very second, and stood before Jesus, what would you say to him? Would he say to you, well done, good and faithful servant? Or would he say what he almost said to me, depart from me? I never knew you? Please. I'm begging you with everything in me. Don't make the mistake I made. Don't wait until you're in hell to call on Jesus. Do it now. Right now. It's so simple. You don't need to clean up your life first. You don't need to memorize prayers or understand theology or become a perfect person. You just need to believe and surrender. Believe that Jesus is Lord. Believe that he died on the cross for your sins. Believe that he rose from the dead. And surrender your life to him. If you're ready, if you're tired of running, tired of pretending, tired of living without him, pray this with me right now. Jesus, I believe you died for me. I believe you rose again. I believe you're the Son of God and the only way to heaven. I'm a sinner. I've done wrong things. I've lived for myself instead of for you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Please come into my life. Please save me. I surrender everything to you. I'm yours. From this moment forward, I'm yours. Amen. If you just prayed that prayer and you meant it, really meant it from your heart, then you just made the most important decision of your entire life. You just went from death to life. From darkness to light. From hell-bound to heaven-bound. Welcome to the family. Welcome home. And let me tell you what happens next, your life is going to change. Not because you have to earn God's love, you already have it. But because when Jesus comes into your life, He transforms you from the inside out. You'll start seeing things differently. Wanting different things. Loving what you used to hate and hating what you used to love. People will notice. Some will celebrate with you. Others will mock you, persecute you, call you crazy. Let them. I've lost friends, career, reputation, money. And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Because I've gained Jesus. And He's worth more than everything this world offers. Get a Bible. Start reading it. Find a church that preaches the Word of God without compromise. Get baptized. Tell people what Jesus did for you. And when it gets hard, and it will get hard, remember what I told you, this world is temporary, but eternity is forever. Keep your eyes on Jesus and don't look back. I don't know how much time we have left. I don't know when Jesus is coming back. But I know it's soon. I can feel it. And I'm telling you, be ready. Live like He could return today. Love people urgently. Share the gospel boldly. Don't waste another day living for yourself. My name is Dr. Michael Reeves. I was an atheist cardiac surgeon who died in a car accident on November 14, 2023. I was clinically dead for 12 minutes. I went to hell. I met Jesus. And He sent me back to tell you. He is real. Heaven is real. Hell is real. And you have a choice. Choose Him. Choose life. Choose eternity. Before it's too late.